I never expected to find love in a stranger's diary on a bus. But it changed everything for us. I will never forget the day everything fell apart like a house of cards. I was stifling in the cramped space of the bus, my heart heavy with despair and loneliness. Gray clouds rolled across the sky, mirroring my mood. Each bump jolted me. Each turn squeezed the air from my lungs. And then there it was, a worn leather-bound diary, resting innocently on the seat beside me like a forgotten secret. My fingers trembled as I hesitated. Was it fate or a cruel joke? I glanced around. No one seemed to care, trapped in their own worlds. I wanted to reach in, but what if it was personal? The diary felt warm against my palms as I opened it. Stains marred the pages, evidence of hurried ink and tortured thoughts living within those lines. Instantly, I dove in, pulled by the words of a stranger. Each line twisted in my chest, resonating with the ache I carried. The emotion surged through the ink, capturing battles with heartbreak, dreams unfulfilled, whispers of love, all so raw and real, it made my eyes burn. The diary painted scenes of late-night conversations, stolen kisses beneath streetlights, laughter echoing in empty rooms. I could almost hear the voices, a melody of joy and sorrow intertwined. I hungrily turned the pages, absorbing every intimate detail, every small memory like fragments of a soul laid bare. My heart raced with each revelation. It felt like I was sharing a secret with someone I'd never met. But then, it shifted. The tone darkened. Words splashed like teardrops. Panic, betrayal, and despair merged on those pages. My heart tightened. Who was this person? What had they endured? Suddenly, the bus screeched to a halt, jerking me from the depths of that diary. I clutched it instinctively, my heart now pounding for a different reason. I glanced around. A new passenger stepped aboard. My breath caught in my throat. Could it be? The stranger had familiar eyes, deep, pool-like, filled with hidden stories. I felt a magnetic pull, as if the universe had tilted. When our gazes met, a jolt of recognition coursed through me. But why? I didn't know them. Yet the diary whispered their secrets like a lover's sigh. I was unsteady as they made their way down the aisle, my mind racing. Was this stranger the author? The heart behind the words? Would I dare to find out? Before I could think of the consequences, I snapped the diary shut. Panic flooding in it felt like the whispers of love and longing were about to drown me whole, leaving me breathless and overwhelmed. Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The seconds dragged as the weight of the diary pressed against my chest, and the realization hit. This stranger, with their captivating, stormy eyes, was entangled in the very fabric of my new world, the world where love appeared unbidden, only to vanish into chaos. I wanted to reach out to feel that connection, yet I was paralyzed by fear. As the bus jerked back into motion, I felt an insurmountable urge to leave the diary behind, to return to the comfort of anonymity. I tried to push the resonance of their gaze from my mind, concentrating instead on the rhythmic thrum of the engine. The pages rustled like whispers in my ears, beckoning me to dive back into the tumultuous emotions I had so recently absorbed. With a deep breath, I glanced over at the stranger, my heart dancing uneasily in my chest. They had found a seat just a few rows ahead of me, staring absent-mindedly out the window, the rain beginning to tap against the glass, echoing my inner turmoil. A fleeting thought crossed my mind. What if I approached them? What if I asked them about the diary, the secrets it held? But what if I was wrong? What if they weren't the author, but rather someone who knew them, someone who would take one look and realize I was just an intruder into an unfinished story? The bus made a stop, and the stranger shifted in their seat, glancing around as if searching for someone. My heart raced, compelling me to make a choice. In that instant, however, two people boarded, laughter spilling into the bus like sunlight breaking through the clouds. They hugged the stranger, a warm embrace that seemed to resonate with warmth and familiarity. I felt a sharp pang of jealousy twist in my gut. Resignation washed over me. I was an outsider, valuable only in stolen moments and tender ink marks. Could I really expect anything from someone whose life was already enshrined in joy and connection? I drew my knees to my chest, refusing to watch their reunion unfold, refusing to let the hollow ache grow any deeper. A voice cut through the atmosphere, rich and melodic. "I'm so glad you came. I thought you wouldn't make it." The stranger's eyes sparkled with relief, amplifying the intensity of the moment, as I forced myself to stay focused on the diary in my lap. The pages felt like ashes against my skin, reminiscent of past flames now extinguished. But there was something about the interplay of laughter and sincerity between them that ignited a tiny flicker of hope. Maybe happiness existed, even in fragments. As they shared stories, I let my imagination wander, weaving my own scenarios into their lives, stitching my heart into theirs. I had become a silent bystander in their tapestry, a patch of color against the usual grayscale of my existence. Even though the heaviness of isolation wrapped around me, I could feel the warmth emitting from the conversation like rays of light peeking through the clouds. But before I could let that hope blossom, my phone buzzed insistently in my pocket, a reminder from reality, commanding my attention. It was my sister. I stared at the screen, hesitating. We hadn't spoken since I left home. The last conversation was laced with anger and misunderstanding. Yet beneath it all, there was a call for help. I had shut her out, unwilling to bear the weight of my own heartache along with hers. I swallowed hard, my choices stacking up like dominoes, ready to fall into chaos. Should I answer and face the storm, or let it pass like the rain outside? Time twisted unnaturally as I watched the stranger share a soft smile with the friends, laughter spilling like music, a reminder of everything I had missed. Oh, how desperately I wanted to believe that connection was possible despite the shadows in my heart. With a shaky breath, I raised my trembling hand to silence the buzz. But then, the stranger turned, their eyes meeting mine once again. In that instant, time paused, and when they smiled, it felt like all my internal turmoil balled up in my throat, longing for release. And then came the shock, like lightning splitting the sky. Just as my heart dared to soar, I noticed something in their grasp, a piece of paper, the corner of which peeking out from the diary I had left on the seat beside me. It fluttered in the air, revealing a single name elegantly penned across it. My name. Everything spiraled. I was rooted to my seat, breath caught in my throat, as the threads of fate twisted into a web more tangled than I could have ever imagined. The hum of the bus faded into the background as my mind raced, the revelation paralyzing me in place. My name scrawled neatly on that piece of paper felt like a powerful magnet drawing me closer to a truth I was unprepared to confront. The diary, the stranger, the laughter shared with friends. Everything hinged precariously on this one shocking discovery. I shifted in my seat, my heart thudding in rhythm with the patter of rain on the roof. What did it mean? How was my name linked to a stranger who appeared to be anchored in their own world of joy and connection? The very air around me felt charged, alive with tension that begged for understanding. It was no longer just a diary. It had become the very conduit to my own hidden desires and unspoken fears. I watched as the stranger's gaze flicked between their friends and the paper, not fully grasping the weight they held. When they unfolded it, their expression shifted. A flicker of surprise danced in their stormy eyes before they masterfully masked it with a teasing grin. They tucked the paper back into the diary as if hiding a secret that could unravel everything. In that split second, warmth dissolved into insecurity. I could feel the edges of my isolation pressing back in, taunting me with questions that spiraled endlessly. Was this merely coincidence, a cruel twist of fate, or a string connecting our disparate lives in ways I couldn't yet perceive? I had thought about the stranger as an enigma, but this was something altogether different. There was a thread of destiny here, woven through shared names and whispered dreams. If I dared to reach out, Could I break the barriers of my own solitude? Or was I always meant to remain a ghost, haunting the margins of someone else's story? The laughter around me turned hollow as the noise became a reminder of everything I lacked. I glanced at my phone again, the screen lighting up with my sister's name like a lighthouse warning me of rocky shores ahead. I clenched the device in my hand, fighting against the urge to respond to pull myself from the wreckage of my own fears and face the reality I had been avoiding. In the throes of indecision, I caught the stranger's gaze again, but this time they weren't smiling. They were watching me with an intensity that made my heart race and my breath stutter. That split second felt like an eternity, where time lost its grasp, and all that existed were the two of us tethered by a name, a diary, and an inexplicable connection budding between us. "Hey," the stranger called, their voice pulling me from the depths of my swirling thoughts. "Are you okay?" My heart thumped loudly, both at the intimacy of their concern and the vulnerability it demanded of me. I wanted to relay the truth, to let them glimpse the many shades of my pain, my struggles, even my regrets. Yet, in the face of warmth, I felt the cold grip of fear prickling my skin. Would they still want to know me if they uncovered the wreck I was too ashamed to reveal? I opened my mouth, half-formed words tumbling together in confusion, when suddenly a heavy thud reverberated through the bus. It jerked unexpectedly as the driver slammed on the brakes, and a collective gasp echoed within the cabin. I grasped the edge of my seat, my heart racing with adrenaline and the weight of possibilities. "Is everyone okay?" A voice called from the front. The stranger, already on their feet, took a step toward me, concern written all over their face. In that moment, they seemed to embody something genuine and fierce, the very hope that I had been craving but had yet been too afraid to acknowledge. Without thinking, I stood abruptly, meeting them halfway. Our eyes locked, and the rolling chaos around us faded to a stillness held in the storm of our connection. I could feel the world around us dip away, leaving only the two of us, magnetically aligned while everything else spiraled into a fray. And then there it was, a revelation surfacing like a fish breaking the surface of water. I remembered the whispers of the diary, the raw yearning buried within its pages, and I grasped the sweet sting of destiny. Ignoring the panic that reverberated in the bus, I made a choice. "Can we talk?" I blurted out, the words spilling over a precipice I hadn't known I was standing on. But as I spoke, a loud crash erupted from outside, splintering the air and drawing every passenger's gaze through the smeared windows. My heart plummeted, caught off guard by the sudden shift in atmosphere, a violent reminder that the connection I dared to embrace hung precariously against an unseen threat. The strangers around us began murmuring in anxious tones, casting glances outside, and I couldn't shake a dreadful sensation that something was about to change everything. The stranger turned again to face me, uncertainty flickering in their eyes now too, as if our moment was slipping right through our fingers. Whatever had been sparked between us suddenly felt fragile and vulnerable, hanging in the balance of an unforeseen storm. And as I searched their face for an answer, the world outside shifted again, revealing something neither of us could have anticipated. A fiery wreck on the road ahead, smoke curling into the rain-drenched sky, an omen of peril that felt all too close to home. The bus shifted again, its frame creaking ominously as the chatter grew frantic. I was standing there, breathless, the gravity of that moment hanging heavily between us, and my heart raced as I strained to process the scene unfolding outside. The fiery wreck sprawled across the asphalt like an abstract painting of chaos, flames licking at twisted metal, a cacophony of sirens building in the distance, and the frantic voices of my fellow passengers buzzing with alarm. "Is everyone okay?" The driver's voice was steady but strained, a sort of anchor in the rising tide of anxiety. The stranger's eyes darted from the window to my face, concern deepening the lines around their brow. "We need to get off this bus," they urged, urgency creeping into their tone, pulling me further into the reality we couldn't ignore. But how could I think about getting off when everything felt suspended in this fragile moment? I forced myself to breathe, to gain enough clarity to form thoughts that weren't scattered by fear. But was it the wreck or the gravity of our connection that weighed down my chest? The stranger's presence was both a comfort and a chaos so powerful it silenced the panic swirling around us. I didn't want to lose them, and yet everything around us seemed to scream danger. "Here, let me help you," they offered, reaching for my hand with trembling fingers, the warmth of their touch igniting something inside me. As they grasped my palm, an electric pulse surged through me, mingling with the rising tension. It felt as if they were grounding me, a lifeline when I thought I was floundering. Then, unexpectedly, a disturbance erupted at the rear of the bus. A woman had started to cry, wailing about her lost phone, while another passenger argued with the driver about pulling over onto the shoulder. In the face of it all, the stranger's expression hardened as they turned to the chaos behind us. "Stay close," they whispered, eyes serious. As the bus jolted once more did I end that fleeting moment of connection, we felt as if we were the only two souls in an ocean of uncertainty. I nodded, heart pounding, glad for their reassurance amidst the storm. But as we turned away from the window, the unexpectedness continued to spiral around us like a tempest. The driver shouted an order, instructing everyone to stay calm and in their seats. Tension rose anew as the urgency shifted everyone's focus. I glimpsed the fear taking hold of the Othersa, reflection of my own internal turmoil. Before I knew it, we were being ushered to the front of the bus, inching closer to a doorway heavy with the weight of uncertainty. The stranger squeezed my hand tighter as we moved, and I found unexpected solace in their grip. Just beyond the door, I could hear the muted thrum of the world outside, tinged with sirens and shouts. The promise of safety seemed fickle, anchored in the unknown. But just as we reached the bus door, the scream of metal filled the air. The sounds of the wreck shifted, growing ever louder and more frantic. My heartbeat quickened as apprehension clawed at my throat. I didn't want to look, but curiosity dragged my gaze back to the window. What had once been a distant fire was now an inferno, flames licking hungrily at the wreckage that had once belonged to someone. Without much thought, I turned my attention back to the stranger, needing reassurance in the storm of chaos 50 feet away. "We have to get off this bus," I declared, as a new surge of panic coursed through me. They nodded, urgency igniting a fire in their stormy eyes. "Let's go," they said. Yet even in their evident resolve, I saw a flicker of something, fear mixed with determination, swirled together like colors in a stormy sky as we stepped off the bus. The rain greeted us like an old friend, coating our skin with a chill, but I barely noticed. The warmth of their hand against mine anchored me, an unyielding pulse amidst the turmoil. But just as freedom beckoned, a deafening crash rang out, accompanied by shouts erupting from passengers who spilled out after us. The bus swayed, and I stumbled backward, catching my balance with a muted gasp as chaos roared around us. And then, through the throng of terrified faces and the echoes of frenzy, I spotted a figure emerging from a clump of people. A hoodie was pulled low over their face, but the slice of familiar features brought forth a shock of recognition that slammed into me with the force of a freight train. My sister, standing mere feet away, panic shining in her eyes, disbelief mingled with something darker beneath. She hadn't known I was on this bus. She couldn't have. My heart raced not merely with fear but with the haunting realization that she was now part of this chaotic tapestry. A thread woven into this moment I had yet to comprehend fully. She blinked, taking in the scene, her gaze darting between me and the stranger standing at my side. Time stilled, questions dangling like fragile beads of glass, threatening to shatter everything we knew. There we stood, three strangers entwined, our fates tangled in a way I never could have anticipated, ready to collide in the spark of an unforeseen storm. The rain fell harder, as if the sky was weeping in tandem with our confusion. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, all sounds faded into a dull roar as I tried to process what I was seeing. My sister, the one person I thought I would never lose amidst the chaos, stood mere feet from me, and yet the impassable distance between us felt like a chasm created by 1,000 unsaid words, a growing history of distance that had fractured our bond. "Emma," I called, my voice barely breaking through the cacophony. She looked up, her eyes wide, but the recognition in her gaze was quickly replaced by something that felt unsettling, fear mixed with the tension of unresolved issues. Her presence here was a fragile spark against the dark backdrop of chaos, yet it felt so tenuous, as if it might flicker out any moment. "What are you doing here?" she shouted back, a hint of accusation lacing her words, but there was also a current of palpable fear. "You shouldn't be on this bus." Before I could respond, the stranger beside me leaned in, their hands still clasping mine. "We need to find safety," they urged, glancing around at the fleeing passengers. As they spoke, my heart wavered between my sister's panic and the stranger's palpable bravery. This connection felt like a lifeline, a shared pulse beating amidst a storm of uncertainty. "Emma, we need to stick together," I pleaded, wishing to bridge the distance that had grown like a chasm between us. "Why must our first conversation in so long be amidst this wreckage? We can't leave without knowing everyone is okay." But she only shook her head, her breathing rapid, the vulnerability of her expression cutting deep. "I can't, there's too much happening. Just go." "No." I felt anger boil beneath the surfacious simmering rage simmering against the larger chaos swirling around us. "I'm not leaving you." Something crashed behind us, and the startled cries of others momentarily lifted the fog of despair. "Let's get out of here." The stranger pressed once more, their voice steadier than I felt. They tugged at my hand, gently urging me to move forward, but my gaze was anchored on Emma, torn between the comfort of this newfound companion and the dread of what could happen if I chose one over the other. "Can you help me?" I finally turned back to the stranger, searching their eyes for understanding, a spark of hope against the maelstrom. We could help each other. The stranger took a deep breath and nodded, releasing their grip just enough to allow me to step towards Emma. "We can scoop up the others and get to safety," they suggested, glancing back at the growing panic behind us. Tension filled the air as I approached my sister, who was now staring into the midst of the chaos. "Emma, I'm right here. We can't lose each other again. Not like this," I implored, feeling my heart beating wildly against my ribs. Before she could respond, another loud crash echoed, metal twisting in a grotesque symphony. With it, a wave of firefighters and paramedics rolled in, yelling commands over the din for everyone to move away from the bus. "Listen to them," the stranger urged, stepping beside me, a silent promise that they wouldn't abandon me. My sister's brow furrowed, uncertainty flickering in her stormy eyes. "You really don't understand, do you? You can't just swoop in like this. You don't know how lost we've become." Her words hung between us, heavy with past conversations left unspoken. "I am trying to find us," I whispered, desperation tinging my voice as I felt the world tilting dangerously beneath us. "I thought I was losing you forever. Let's not run from each other just because everything else is falling apart." But her hesitation shattered the fragile moment, and I could see the fear wrapped in layers of grief and regret. An echo of time spent apart, the fights over trivialities, the unspoken heartbreak of lives lived in parallel. "Look, just go," she cried, her voice rising above the growing noise, emotions spilling over. "You should be with whoever that is." The stranger's presence felt like a gentle embrace, urging me to step forward. They squeezed my hand, but my heart ached at being forced to choose. "I don't want to leave you, Emma," I pleaded again, wishing to unwrap her fears and replace them with memories of sisterhood filled with laughter. What if we could make it out together?" The air thickened with tension, shadows encroaching on the moment as a group of paramedics rushed toward us, their voices now a soundtrack of urgent concern. But despair clawed at my heart as the realization hit me like a brick. Time was running out, and I had to act, had to make a choice. Suddenly, the stranger stepped even closer, their presence radiating warmth against the coldness creeping in. "If you stay, I'll be here with you. But you have to let her in," they urged, looking back at my sister, who seemed to be spiraling, caught between fear and something heavier. Then I heard it, an unmistakable click, a sound that sent chills racing down my spine. The bus exploded into a fiery furnace, lighting up the night sky with terrifying brilliance. No longer a mere scene of chaos, it suddenly transformed into a backdrop of impending doom as shards of metal whirled into the AI art. In that instant, all hope of division crashed away. Time slowed, the flames flickering like cruel specters, and I realized, with despair washing over me, that whatever choice I made, the gravity of love and connection was entwined in the very fabric of turmoil surrounding us. "Emma," I screamed above the din of chaos as her face turned towards me, eyes wide with disbelief and tinged with hope. But before I could take a step closer, a wave of people surged forward in a desperate attempt to escape, throwing my path off kilter. My sister stumbled backward, colliding with the stranger, who instinctively reached out to save her as I watched in horror. The world blurred around me as shouts filled the air, and then the call of sirens became an omnipresent scream. I didn't know what was happening. All I knew was that we were unraveling, caught in whirlwinds of choice and consequence. And in that critical moment, I was left standing at the precipice of heartache and connection. The air heavy with unsaid words and tethered souls, praying desperately that when the storm cleared, we would still find our way back to each other. The chaos around us faded into a muffled blur, a haunting backdrop against the cacophony of my heart. I searched for Emma's face in the mass of frantic bodies, feeling both trapped and torn in the downpour of displaced voices. The stranger's grip on my hand tightened, an anchoring force in a storm overtaken by uncertainty. "Stay close. We need to move," they urged, their tone urgent yet soft, as if sensing the turmoil raging within me. I nodded, though dread hung heavier than the oppressive clouds above. But as the crowd surged, the memories of Emma loomed larger, her laughter resonating like wind chimes in my mind, echoing moments where we had been inseparable. I wanted to reach out, to wrap my arms around her for reassurance. The sisterly bond that should have been impenetrable beginning to fray under the weight of unspoken words. The growing distance between us felt more suffocating than the smoke rising from the bus. "Listen, we can't just leave her." My voice cracked as I turned toward the stranger, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm of panic. "She's my sister." A shimmer of understanding flickered in the stranger's eyes, but they shook their heads subtly, a silent acknowledgement of the difficult choices ahead. "I know, but we can't help anyone unless we get to safety first," they pressed, glancing over their shoulder towards the flames devouring the remnants of the bus. With a reluctant exhale, I let their words settle in my heart. My instincts screamed to push through the undulating sea of bodies and reach her, but the reality of the situation gripped me fiercely. I could almost feel the heat radiating off the ruins of the bus, sending sparks of fear coursing through my veins. Suddenly, just as hope felt like a fragile relic, Emma's face emerged like a beacon through the chaos. She had disentangled herself from the surge and was standing at the periphery, wide-eyed and trembling. "Please," she called out, her voice breaking. "Don't leave me." "Emma," I shouted, breaking free from the stranger's grasp without a second thought. But before I could get to her, the crowd shifted again, and a sudden wave of people poured around me, sweeping me further away from the one I sought to protect. It was like being trapped in the undertow of a wild ocean, desperate for breath, yet the shore was invisible amidst the chaos. The world spiraled into an agonizing slow motion as I watched her eyes widen, fear reforming into resolve as she turned toward the flames, seemingly grasping the risks surrounding us. I caught a glimpse of her lips moving, forming the words "go," but the sound was drowned by the roar of chaos, leaving me grasping at nothing but wavering air. "Please," I cried out again, pushing against the throng with every ounce of strength. I strained to reach her, my heart pounding a frenzied rhythm almost drowning out the world. Just then, as fate would have it, a pair of very large hands gripped my shoulders from behind, yanking me into a tight hold against the stranger, who pulled me back with surprising urgency. "Now is not the time," they shouted, desperation anchoring their words. "We're not safe here." I realized that their determination was fierce, but so was mine. I needed to make a choice that transcended the immediate turmoil, a choice that would ripple far beyond this very moment. "You don't understand," I responded, scrambling against them. "She's more than just family. I can't just abandon her." Through a sudden shift within the crowd, I spotted Emma once more. She was moving toward the rear of the bus, where the warmth of chaos ignited into a fiery brilliance. "Emma, no!" Panic surged through me, slicing deeper than the smoke swirling through the cold air. It was then, amid the shadows and chaos, that I felt a flickering presence, a small gesture in the torrent surrounding us. An elderly woman, her hands trembling yet resolute, pulled me back to reality. She was struggling with a child beside her, moving in the opposite direction yet casting me a glance that spoke volumes. "Help us," she cried, a glint of hope in her eyes. My pulse raced as the choice crystallized painfully in my mind. Emma was there, battling her own demons. I could see that plainly in the set of her jaw and the twinkle of firelight in her eyes. But here too was this woman's unexpected kindness against the backdrop of despair, and I felt a sudden urgency to break the cycle of fear. "Help her," I urged the stranger, pointing toward the bewildered woman cradling the child, my instinct screaming for connection, for compassion to swell just as fiercely as the flames. "We have to help them." Their gaze flicked from me to the woman and back, uncertainty swirling in their eyes. "I can't save everyone," they cried, desperation creeping into their tone. A fierce determination arose, igniting the embers of my own courage. "But we can try. We have to at least do something." I took a step toward the old woman, urging the stranger to follow as my heart battled between sisterly love and the kindness bubbling within me. In that moment, the crowd surged again, and I felt two opposing currents pulling me apart, one anchored in familial ties and another in the fragile threads of human compassion. Yet, in the eye of the storm, clarity washed over me. Perhaps both could coexist, if only I grasped tightly enough. Just as I reached for the elderly woman, smoke engulfed us, sending a choking veil across my throat. Instinctively, I turned to look for Emma once more, and just as I laid eyes on her, turmoil reflected back, the flames on the bus rekindled with a ghastly roar. Then, in the instant that felt unbearably long, I watched horror-struck as the ground beneath her shifted, claiming her retreating form. My sister was swallowed whole, lost in a conflagration of chaos as the world around me blurred once again. "Emma!" The cry echoed in my soul, the weight of my heart squeezing tight as I wrestled against the surge of bewilderment and grief. The stranger clung tightly to my arm, their eyes wide with shock and helplessness. "We have to go," they shouted, pulling me back as realization collided with despair. I felt myself resisting, time stalling as I desperately sought Emma among the smoke and chaos, knowing she was fading from view, being consumed by something dark and relentless. "Not without her," the words spilled out, heavy with emotion and drenched in the rain of loss. My heart twisted painfully as everything I cared for felt like it was unraveling before my very eyes. And yet, just as I felt the agony of loss seep through every cracked corner of my heart, something flickered, a glimmer of movement at the edge of my vision. "Hold on," I shouted at the stranger, the horror of our separation awakening something fiercely primal within. Hope rose reluctantly against the tide of despair as a figure stumbled through the smoke, Emma, re-emerging from the flames. But even as relief pulsed through me, I felt the heaviness of a shattered connection hanging in the air, a realization dawning like a cruel sunrise. She was not the same. Something deep in her gaze exchanged the innocence of our bond for hardened resolve, a flicker of fear now mingling with the flame of determination as the world collapsed around us and the sirens became a blood-like chorus of impending doom. I knew I stood at a precipice, teetering between hope and heartbreak. We had survived, but somehow, we still existed on opposite shores, our paths stretched thin and fragile, chasing after love found in the wreckage of our reality. I could only wonder what it would take to bridge the gulf between us lost and found amidst the chaos of the human heart. The air was thick with smoke and despair as I dragged in a ragged breath, my heart racing wildly in my chest. Emma's figure had broken through the haze, a glimmering part of the chaos that made sense so briefly until I met her startled eyes. As I stumbled toward her, I could still hear the distant wail of sirens, mingling with the cries of those around us. "Emma!" The name tore from my throat, bursting forth with a mix of relief and anguish. I hadn't prepared for the transformation I witnessed. The fire that had forged her from abroad now reshaped the laughter I'd once known into a fierce gaze filled with unspoken warnings. "What took you so long?" she asked, a brittle edge to her voice as she wiped soot from her brow, revealing a streak of determination that was new, terrifying, yet oddly comforting. I faltered, unsure how to bridge the distance that this traumatic event had carved between us. "I thought I lost you," Emma laughed, though the sound felt foreign, choked and hollow. Yet, Beneath the surface, I could see the hint of a smile, a flicker of the sister I had fought to protect. That's not happening. You know me better than that. But the moment was fleeting. The crowd surged again, carrying us in its unpredictable current. We were two ships trying desperately to tether ourselves together, but a storm was breaching our harbors. "Get down," shouted the stranger, pulling us both into a tight embrace as debris rained down from the bus. My mind whirl at it was instinct, survival mode pushing me to cling to them and to Emma, though I could feel the urgency of the stranger's heartbeat against my back like a war drum. "Why are you helping us?" Emma shot over her shoulder, her voice steady but laced with curiosity as we huddled together. The stranger's face registered surprise, but there was something unyielding and kind beneath their urgency. "We don't have time for that," they responded, but I saw the spark of sincerity glint in their eyes. After an eternity caught in fear's vice, the ground steadied beneath us, and we could move again. Still, I felt the rough echoes of the past clutching my throat, waves of unease rising and falling as I turned my gaze back to Emma. "We need to stick together," I insisted, holding her gaze fiercely. She nodded, her expression somber yet resolute. "I want to find Mama." The mention of our mother struck me like a crisp wind in winter. We had always found solace in imagining her, carefully knitting the pieces of our childhood back together every time things got rough. But now, the reality of our fractured family was stark and chilling. "Emma," I began gently, "what if she's not here? What do we do then?" She shook her head in defiance. "We have to find her. She's in the city. She's always been there for us." The conviction in her voice would have been comforting if it hadn't struck such a deep insecurity in my heart. "But what if don't say it?" Emma's voice rose sharply, the smoke caught in her throat turning her conviction bitter. Yet I could see the cracks forming in her iron facade. "We can't lose anyone else." My chest tightened as the weight of our shared trauma bore down on me. I had to remind myself that whatever force had brought us back together was stronger than the devastation threatening to pull us apart. "Okay, then let's find her." The determination in her eyes ignited a semblance of hope I thought I'd lost. We moved on instinct, drawing away from the crumbling chaos in our wake, gripping each other for support as our surroundings glowed with a soft, surreal light. A bruising coral against an indigo sky. In that strange moment, I felt the subtle threads of connection between us fray and weave anew. The stranger walked alongside us, steadfast and unyielding, and as we rounded a corner, I noticed the women and children around us, their vulnerability leaping out amidst the wreckage of lingering despair. An unexpected kindness captured my attention as one elderly woman, dirt-streaked and hollow-eyed, reached out for my hand. "I saw your sister." Her voice barely rose above the noise, but her those eyes shimmered with an indescribable warmth I hadn't known I needed until that moment. "What?" I asked, breathless, caught in the web of her presence. "She is helping others outside the wreckage. She told me to tell you to keep moving, that she could handle it." A weight lifted momentarily from my chest, fear intertwining dangerously with a flicker of hope. "We have to find her," I started, but the severity of the woman's gaze held me anchored, a tether keeping me from rushing back into that storm. "She's not alone," the woman insisted, squeezing my hand just enough to anchor my swirling thoughts. "All will be well. Focus on the path ahead." And as I turned to face Emma, I caught a glimpse of something I realized I had to face along with my sister. There was an unyielding resilience in us, a force both fragile and fierce. Our bond might be halved, split by fear and chaos, but the truth was, we couldn't shirk this journey whatever awaited us on the path ahead. But just as I articulated this silent promise to myself, an oath etched into the storm, I felt a shudder from the ground beneath us, an ominous rumble signaling that the evening was far from over. "Run!" shouted the stranger, urgency driving their voice to a pitch higher than I had ever heard, snapping Emma and me out of our reverie. I turned, ready to flee, but before I could take a step, a blaring horn shattered the night. A police van, perhaps, was hurtling toward us, the tires screeching as the headlights sliced through the shadows, illuminating the chaos of the streets like crackling lightning. "Get out of the way!" The stranger pulled us into a tight embrace just as the world lurched once more. An explosion of metal and fragments firing into the air. As reality seized us again, panic gripping me hard, I locked eyes with Emma, understanding our mutual despair all too well. We were no longer just bound by sisterhood but by the harrowing unpredictability of survival. Just when I thought I understood the perils of our world, I saw a fire ignite in Emma's gaze, one that had dimmed earlier, yet simmered anew amidst the tumult. Together, she mouthed silently, a promise swelling between us. But as memories and fragments whirled around me, I sensed an unmistakable weight of loss still lurking, one more haunting than flames and wreckage. I had to confront the chasm that had only grown deeper through each unresolved moment. With my heart racing and hope refusing to flicker out, I braced for the next challenge, knowing that whatever awaited us, we had no option but to forge ahead, deeper into uncharted territory and perhaps uncover the heart of our long-lost connection along the way. The air felt different as we sped away from the chaos, a subtle shift that hinted at the possibility of something new. Emma and I, still tethered by our shared resolve, stumbled into a narrow alley where only shadows dared to linger. It was quieter here, a surreal contrast to the pandemonium outside, and for a moment we finally caught our breath. Emma's breath came in short gasps, but I could see the flickers of determination dancing in her eyes. We need to regroup. Find a plan. She glanced sideways at the stranger, who had been our unexpected guardian since the beginning of this nightmare. "What's your name?" I asked, needing to draw in the reality of the unyielding presence that had kept us safe. "Luca," they replied simply, casting a quick glance around the alley, their stance still alert. "And you too should consider finding shelter. This isn't over." I nodded, my thoughts racing alongside my heart. We were in the eye of a storm with no measure of safety beyond the ghosts of hope and goodwill that had pulled us together. What can we do? We can't just leave. We leave when it's safe. But we have to be smart, Luca interrupted gently. We can't fight everyone, and I saw how the fire spread. Help others, and maybe you'll find your mother along the way. The mention of our mother knotted tight in my stomach. You think she's out there? My voice barely held the weight of my own despair that I believe everything can change just as quickly as it can burn. Luca responded, a distant look momentarily flickering in their eyes. We need to work with what we have. Hope ignited within me. We weren't alone. We had the strength of three bonded by this firestorm, sister to sister, stranger to stranger. The weight of shared purpose shouldering our burdens. All right, let's find survivors then, I decided, but before we could move, the sound of a distant crack like a thunderclap jarred my senses. Stay close, Emma whispered urgently, gripping my arm. We stepped back into the nurturing embrace of shadows, crouched low, peering out into the turmoil that had unfolded beyond our makeshift refuge. The glow of flickering flames illuminated faces, some grim, others bewildered, drifting like specters through fractured lives. Look, Luca pointed, gesturing through the haze. A few blocks ahead, a cluster of people had gathered around a makeshift aid station, a flicker of humanity amidst the anarchy. There were hands reaching out, unintended kindness unfolding like petals opening to the sun. Maybe they have information? Emma suggested, her voice tinged with hope. Or maybe I hesitated, the pieces of our fractured world swirling in my mind like debris in the wind. Maybe we can help. The three of us exchanged glances. The weight of uncertainty no longer daunted us. We were armed with purpose. We took cautious steps, weaving our way through the wreckage until we reached the group assembled around a small fire, its warmth inviting despite the sorrow lingering in the air. "Thank you for coming," an elderly man said, his voice quavering yet firm. "We desperately need help stabilizing the area. There's been a surge of people looking for their loved ones. The lady who called me towards you," I stammered, rushing my words. "Ish said she saw my sister. I need to find her." As I spoke, an unseen weight shifted within me. Committing to the hunt for Emma and our mother felt intimidating. Yet standing here, shoulder to shoulder with oblivious strangers and their shared anguish, emboldened my heart further. "Well, help," Emma declared. "We can search different neighborhoods and report back. Then it hit me, the reality of our situation blurring my thoughts. But what if we can't find them? Then we keep looking, Luca said with fervent conviction, eyes shining with resilience, completely unassuming from our surroundings. We're walking this path together. A budding determination rose within me. Every person here carried the weight of broken dreams and sorrowful desires that sought reconstruction. As we prepared to split up, Emma turned to me, her presence a calming balm against the uncertainty. No matter what happens, keep your eyes open. If you see her, signal suddenly. A ruckus erupted outside our immediate haven. A series of harsh shouts and pounding footsteps cutting through our brief moment of serenity. Damn it, it's the cops, a man yelled, sending everyone into a flurry of panic. Not again. The elderly man trembled, his face betraying his fears. They'll only make this worse. I felt my heart quicken, clawing against my ribcage as Luca grabbed my wrist and directed me behind a linear stretch of shelving. I could hear Emma's steadied breath beside me, trying to hold onto our previous resolve despite the encroaching danger. Just then, in my peripheral vision, I caught sight of an item half buried in the rubbly notebook, its cover marred but still intact. I reached for it, my fingers brushing the fragile paper. As Emma's eyes locked onto mine, it could be a diary, I whispered, drawn towards it, ignoring the chaos spinning around us. Wait, Emma hissed, still focused on the commotion. Don't get distracted. But something compelled me to open the diary, the pages yellowing and frayed yet filled with an intimate script. Each line summoned a world far greater than our own. Tales of love, loss, and longing amidst chaos, a testimony that glinted with hidden truths waiting to emerge. Suddenly, I felt the world around us slip as the cops descended on our haven, demanding answers I could not understand, and yet the ink on the pages began to bleed into the fabric of my own heart. As Emma and Luca braced themselves for whatever would come next, I knew this discovery would change everything for us. But just as clarity formed around my thoughts, a chilling realization echoed within my soul. Whoever had written this diary had fled from their own fires, and perhaps their final entry held the key not just to our survival, but a new revelation that would shake our very foundation. And so, in the dying light, as chaos reigned and love mingled with despair in my hands, I realized the journey we were on was more connected than I had ever imagined. And as the door to our sanctuary creaked open, a new threat loomed beyond, ready to alter the course of our lives forever. The heat of anxiety pulsed through me as I flipped through the pages of the diary, the clutter of emergency and fear bubbling underneath. Each word seemed to resonate with a truth I hadn't yet dared to face. My fingers trembled, brushing against the hastily scribbled lines that spoke of heartache and the burning need for connection. Shoo, Emma breathed, straining to listen beyond our makeshift shelter, attempting to gauge the severity of the chaos swirling around us like a tempest threatening to tear us apart. Luca stood like a pillar beside her, eyes darting nervously toward the shadows. But the words in the diary held me captive. A shift in time and space, a narrative larger than my own. I am afraid, the writer explained in delicate strokes. Afraid that in our search for those we have lost, we will become lost ourselves. I held my breath, tethered to the stark reality outside, while the ink colored a world filled with emotion that mirrored my own. Moments later, the distinct sound of shouting broke through my reverie. A wave of urgency surged as a voice I recognized, mother's, echoed. Where are you? Just as another voice, a police officer's, demanded order. My heart lurched violently in my chest. Did you hear that? I whispered, leaning closer, gripping the diary tightly, as if it could protect me from the unfolding chaos that clawed at my consciousness. Yeah, Emma said, eyes wide with disbelief. But we can't. I have to look, I interjected, feeling the weight of everything crashing into an unbearable burden. I was so close. The familiar timbre of her voice felt like a lighthouse illuminating my darkest fears. Wait, Mia, Luca urged, but the urgency eclipsed my reason. I pushed past the shelving, needing to locate that comforting presence that had once been my anchor in stormy seas. I wasn't prepared for the scene outside. It was madness, a swirl of body and sound, chaos fusing with desperation as officers rounded up anyone left standing. Panic surged through the crowd, Yet amidst the cries and chaos were faces twisted in worry and shared loss, each person bearing their own heavy burden. "Mia," Emma called, but the call felt muted against the swell of noise, the fear of losing her intertwining with my own frantic determination. And then there she was, standing amidst the throng, me mother, wild-eyed and frantically searching. I had not imagined how powerful it would be to see her again. Time slowed, and in that moment, all I felt was the thundering pulse of my heart and the unyielding need to reach her. "Mama!" I screamed, but the crowd swallowed my voice whole as I fought my way through the masses. People surged around me, but I pushed forward, desperate to bridge the distance that had once seemed insurmountable. But just as I surged closer, I saw a police officer block my path. "You can't go through," he barked, forcing me to a halt. "Please, I need to see her." My voice faltered under the weight of panic. My mother glanced in my direction, the look of recognition igniting a spark of hope that burst within me. But the officer remained unfazed, his eyes devoid of empathy. And then, just as I thought I had lost my chance, I heard a voice break through the murmur of the crowd, firm yet tinged with warmth. "Let her through. She's my daughter." The words broke the chaos. They poured out of Luca, standing tall like a lighthouse amidst the storm. The officer hesitated, the authority in his eyes wavering as he sized up the situation. "Sir, this is a restricted area. She's not just another face in the crowd," Luca declared resolutely. "This is a family in need." The human connection resonated like a lifeline thrown into choppy waters, and slowly, the officer began to relent. "All right, go," he grumbled and stood aside, even as uncertainty flickered in his eyes, perhaps suspecting the very love that compels one to risk everything in such chaos. Incredibly, I pushed past him, grasping the moment that felt both surreal and intimate. My mother turned, confusion morphing into astonishment as our eyes locked. "Mia," she breathed, a mix of relief and raw emotion flooding her. Voice this world, so broken, suddenly looked whole again. I rushed to her, arms outstretched. But then, another chaotic sound broke the moment, the ominous crack of gunfire. Gasps cut through the air. Panic erupted anew as people scrambled. "Get down," I yelled, pulling my mother close just before her terror overtook her. Shots rang out again, sending the gathered crowd into a frenzy of fear, stray bodies falling, others sprinting for safety. Desperation seeped into every part of me as I shielded my mother, the diary clutched tightly to my chest. "Let's go," I screamed over the tumult, looking back toward Emma and Luca, wishing we could all return to the fleeting moments of solace I had held so dear just minutes ago. Was this a new beginning or a tragic end? Then came the dull thud of something impacting the earth. A flash of realization gripped me. I looked down at the diary, the very object imbued with echoing emotions pretending to be lifelines. But as I glanced back up, horror coursed through my veins at what I saw: a figure emerging from the shadows, aiming directly at us, his intentions cold and clear. This their farewells. The kindness shared within the diary was just the beginning of our harrowing journey, and everything hung in a fragile balance, teetering between hope and despair as the truth writhed underneath the surface, waiting to be unleashed amid the fading light. The world had grown dimmer, painted with the brushstrokes of fear and chaos. As I clutched the diary tightly to my chest, a frail reminder of the warmth of connection I had fought so hard to reclaim. With my mother in my arms, I felt the implications of survival rest on this momentous, fragile, thin thread, connecting us through the rubble of our fears. Just as my heart expanded, echoing with the promise of reunion, the deafening gunfire shattered the air, sending shockwaves of terror cascading through the crowd, a stark reminder that hope could disappear in the blink of an eye. "Stay close," I shouted, my voice trembling as I turned to face my mother, her eyes wide with uncertainty. All around us, panic reigned. People screamed, rushing in all directions as palpable fear gripped the air. I felt the weight of the world crushing down on my shoulders, heavy with unspoken words and burdens stretching far beyond the flames and wreckage surrounding us. The anguish of losing Emma once again gnawed at my insides like a wild beast, but here, with my mother's heartbeat resonating next to mine, I refused to let despair latch onto my soul as I scanned the chaotic scene. I spotted Emma and Luca, threading through the surging mass of bodies eyes wide, a collective determination etched on their faces. Time seemed to slow, becoming a breathless pause as my heart ached with the fragile hope that we could navigate this storm together. But as the cacophony of chaos cascaded around us, the gunfire punctured the air once more. A woman fell, crumpling lifelessly to the ground, and just beyond, the figure emerged from the shadows, his gaze steely and unyielding, aiming a weapon directly at us. "Run!" I shouted, instinct gripping my throat. Even in the face of danger, I didn't want to lose my family again. I turned, urging my mother to follow as I plunged deeper into the tumult. Each pounding footstep felt like a countdown to destruction, the distance between us and safety shrinking dangerously. "We need to find shelter," I yelled, weaving through the bodies, the echoes of distant cries drowning any sense of direction. "Mia." My heart twisted at Emma's voice rising above the chaos. I caught a glimpse of her frantic expression, desperately trying to reach us through the surge of terrified bodies closing in. The shadows around us seemed to grow thicker, chaotic winds swirling and intertwining with flames that flickered close enough to singe our souls. Every heartbeat thundered in my chest, a relentless reminder of what I had almost lost. "Get down!" Luca's voice cut through the haze, and I felt the world drop as we ducked close to the ground. The air shook with the force of the gunfire that had become a haunting refrain, one we were desperately trying to escape. An overwhelming surge of adrenaline exploded within me, propelling us forward through the narrow alleyways that appeared like veils between nightmare and safety. With my mother by my side and Emma and Luca behind, I focused my energy on pushing through the waves of chaos. My pulse raced as I caught snippets of frantic conversations around us, a tapestry woven with stories of pain, but also whispers of resilience, a reminder that amidst the uncertainty lay the strength of connection that would help us survive the darkness. "Over here," Emma shouted, her voice rising above the din, guiding us toward a nearby building. My heart soared with the flicker of hope reigniting in my chest. Perhaps there was a way to shield ourselves from this unfolding nightmare. The door swung open, and we tumbled into the relative safety of the dimly lit interior. The room was crowded, filled with others seeking refuge, fearful faces illuminated only by the flickering flames casting impossible shadows against the walls. We were a group caught between survival and something deeper, inextricably woven together in the midst of a storm that was far too intense to comprehend. I could see it in the heaviness of Emma's gaze and the fierce tenacity in my mother's expression that we were tethered in this moment, stronger together than apart. Just as I started to grasp the enormity of our connect, Iona recognition that we had transcended the chaos in search of shelter against the storms of our heart's hope blossomed anew, as a familiar face broke through the crowd. It was our mother's friend, Mary, rushing toward us with panic etched across her features. "I was looking for you," she breathlessly exclaimed, eyes wild. "There's a place in the back, it's safer. We need to get you out of sight." As she swept us away, I felt the breath of uncertainty rekindle, the shadows gathering like storm clouds around us. I turned, searching for Luca amidst the throng, but saw only the terror and desperation mirrored in every bewildered gaze I met. "What about him?" I asked urgently, needing to make sure that our anchor, this unexpected hero, wasn't left behind in our frenzy for safety. Mary shook her head, brow furrowed in concern. "He'll find us. We need to move now." There was an urgency in her voice that propelled me forward, and soon we found ourselves in a cramped back room, the door blocking out the familiar sounds of chaos. It all closed in around me, the walls made of a tangible fear that hung like a shroud. "This room is safe," Mary reassured us, her fingers still gripping my mother's wrist as if to anchor her against the tide. "Just breathe." But in that moment, with the world just outside ready to crumble, I realized my heart was anything but calm. Gnawing uncertainty clawed at my insides, and I couldn't fight the urge to reach for the journal buried deep in my bag. It felt vital, almost like a lifeline to reestablish the thread of connection that was binding us through torn pages rich with vulnerability. As I pulled it out, the pages rustled softly in the hush. The fragility of the writing clasped me with an intimate tenderness that echoed against my thoughts. I flipped to the last entry, the ink flowing into a gentle heartbeat across the surface. Even in the darkest moments, I believe love stitches souls and binds hearts tighter than the world attempts to fray. Holding my breath, I looked around the small room, seeing Emma's wide eyes focused on me, and my mother, her face a mixture of worry and warmth. In that fleeting moment, I could feel the weight of love surrounding USA fierce protection fusing through our vulnerability. And then, I understood it wasn't just a connection to others or a reunion with family. The power of love was eternal, woven amid the chaos, waiting patiently for us to recognize it. We had risen together. Together we would continue to find our way, threading through the dark, unpredictable tapestry of life. In the face of an overwhelming world, I looked at Emma and my mother, the glimmers of determination shining through fear. No matter what happens next, we will find each other again, I whispered fiercely, knowing that in this moment amidst such devastation, the promise to seek each other in every storm was the only truth that mattered. And just as I reached for the resolve this moment had birthed within me, a sharp crack echoed outside, breaking through the stillness. It snapped in the air like a twig underfoot, echoing like a distant truth. I reached for Emma's hand, my heart racing. We stood ready to embrace the next chapter of our lives, bound by the unbreakable thread of love even when the horizon was still dark. Little did we know that within the pages I grasped tightly, the final words awaited to be understood, a reflection on the journey we were destined to embark together. We may be lost in the chaos, but love will always be the compass that leads us home. And with that truth burning brightly in my heart, we would step back into the storm and reclaim what had been lost. As we prepared to confront the uncharted path ahead, I knew one thing with unwavering certainty. Our lives, ever tangled in love and loss, had just begun their most powerful journey yet.